And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting on commercial radio stations from coast to coast on Sirius XM, all across the North American continent, on Pacifica stations all across America, Europe, and Africa, on American Forces Radio, on every U.S. military base in the world, and simulcast on television on both Dish Network, DirecTV, and cable systems nationwide via the Free Speech TV network. It's the first hour of our program and time for Brunch with Bernie. And by the way, let me just put this disclaimer out. Or it's not a disclaimer, it's an invitation. Since Senator Sanders has declared that he's running for president, if any other legitimate, serious presidential candidates, you know who you are, Rick Perry, Hillary Clinton, would like to have an hour on this program once a week to answer questions from our callers, the door is open. Senator Sanders, welcome.
Great to be with you, Tom.
Great to have you, sir. What has been happening since we spoke last?
Well, we had a busy weekend in Washington dealing with a number of issues, but let me begin by talking about an interesting New York Times poll that I think was just appeared yesterday, if my understanding is correct. And what it told us is what you and I have been talking about, and many of our listeners have been talking about for a very long time, is that the ideas that we are bringing up, which to corporate media or to folks inside the Beltway may seem radical, really are very mainstream. Let me just give you an example of some of the results of the poll. 68% of the American people, according to a recent New York Times poll, favored raising taxes on the rich, people making $1 million a year or more. Now, in Washington, this is thought to be a very crazy, fringy idea, and yet 68% of the American people believe that. In fact, what the Republicans in the Congress are doing is exactly the opposite. In the budget that passed last month, they gave huge tax breaks to the wealthiest 0.2% by repealing the estate tax. So 68% of the American people understanding the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality and the needs, enormous social needs, infrastructure needs that we have as a country, they say, ask the wealthy to stop paying their fair share of taxes. Republicans in Congress say, oh, no, we're going to do exactly the opposite, more tax breaks for billionaires. Then what you have is, in that very same poll, 74% of the American people believe that corporations have too much influence on American life and politics. That's 74%. What you believe, what I believe, and what the vast majority of our listeners believe, and according to the New York Times, the overwhelming majority of the American people, is that at a time when corporations have so much power, and as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the billionaire class is now in the process of buying the United States government and state governments all over this country because they can now spend unlimited amounts of money on campaigns. What the Republicans in Congress want to do, and what the Republican Party leadership wants to do, is repeal all campaign finance restrictions, regulations, so that billionaires like the Koch brothers can directly fund, give money directly to candidates. Come up to somebody who wants to run for Senate from California, say, here's a check for $300 million. We're running your campaign. You're an employee of the Koch brothers. So again, what you're seeing in Washington is directly opposite of what the American people want. Congress works for the billionaire class, ignores the needs or the desires of the American people. Furthermore, in the poll, not terribly surprising, but it turns out that 85% of the American people favor changing policy so that the United States joins the rest of the world and guarantees workers paid sick leave. Again, not too shocking, but it turns out we are the only wealthy country on earth, out of the 22, I think, wealthiest countries on earth, we're the only one that doesn't do that. So you got workers going into McDonald's today who are sick, preparing your food, because they don't have any paid sick time. And that has got to change. And also, as you and I have further discussed, people don't know this, not talked about much, our people work incredibly long hours. I mean, as real wages have fallen in America, as people are working 2 or 3 jobs, it is not uncommon to find people working 50 or 60 hours a week. And what is also really quite incredible is that there are new jobs being offered out there. And do you know how much vacation time they offer, Tom?
Very often none, I'm guessing.
That's right. So you're hiring people. I mean, as we see the disappearance of the middle class, this is what it's about. People are saying, hey, yeah, we're prepared to hire you at low wages. And by the way, there is no sick time. There is no vacation time. And this is where America is moving. So, again, 85% of the people polled believe that it is time to make sure that employers guarantee paid sick leave to employees. Point being that on issue after issue, the American people feel one way. They understand that the middle class of this country is disappearing. They want government to start standing up for them and not just the very, very wealthy. And yet you have a Congress which ignores the needs of the American people and does the bidding of the Congress, of the billionaire class. Let me mention another issue out there that I just did a very nice event at an organization called HOPE in Washington, D.C. And what this organization does, and I did this event with Congressman John Conyers of Michigan, and what John and I have done is introduce legislation which would provide substantial funding for states and communities all over America in order to reach out to young people in this country who today have no jobs and are out of school. We have 5.5 million kids out in the world today, here in America, who have either dropped out of high school or have graduated high school and they have no jobs. And they're not and many of these kids are getting into trouble, doing drugs, ending up in jail. So at a time when youth unemployment is 17% and African-American youth unemployment is 27%, I think it makes a lot more sense for us to be investing in jobs, investing in education, and keeping our young people constructively occupied, getting them onto the pathway of careers. And this particular organization in D.C. does a great job. What they do is work with young people in information technology, and they have a pretty intensive course, mostly African-American, and when the kids graduate, they're going out and getting decent-paying jobs. And we had 2 young people. One was working for the World Bank, and one was working for a government agency, making really good money. And I think at a time when we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China, and when we have a disproportionate number of minorities in jail, it is time to take a hard look at why young people are ending up in jail, and let's focus on education and job training. So we're excited about that program. We're going to work hard on it. Another issue that's obviously being debated widely in the Congress now is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And it was very interesting that in the poll, this New York Times poll that I referred to, a lot of people didn't know about the TPP. And a good reason that they don't know about the TPP is I think that major television networks haven't spent 1 minute, literally 1 minute, discussing the TPP. It's an issue that it's a legislation that corporate America wants, the big money interest wants. And why bother the American people in terms of explaining to them what this agreement does and why it will end up costing us more and more jobs and endanger our sovereignty. But we can talk about that. We can talk about the USA Patriot Act and what's going on there as well.
Okay. Senator Bernie Sanders is with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour, our national town hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. 15 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls for Senator Sanders right after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Be sure to check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for the Bernie Buzz, and it's a great source of news of what's going on in the day. And welcome back. Senator, did you want to finish some of those thoughts? Or you want to pick up some phone calls?
No, we can get to the phone calls right now.
Okay, great. Actually, I'm guessing that the phone calls will reflect those issues anyway. Paul in South Lyon, Michigan, you are on the air with Senator Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Senator, I heard your great idea of Democrats debating Republicans before the primaries.
Right.
And I'm sure the Democrats love this idea because we have all the issues on our side, and the Republicans only have billionaires on their side. My question is, will there be empty podiums on stage for all the scared Republicans who don't show up?
Paul, it's unfortunately more complicated than that. What we're dealing with is, before I formally entered the race, the Democratic National Committee issued a proposal calling for 6 debates. Frankly, I don't think that is enough, and we have written to the chairperson of the Democratic Party, Debbie Schultz-Wasserman, to suggest otherwise, that we think we need more debates. So what my proposal, Paul, was dealt with 3 elements. Number one, the need for more debates and the need to begin them earlier. Number 2, to include Republicans. And your point is exactly right. The truth of the matter is the Republicans get away with murder because what they stand for is very rarely discussed. And I think, as I've mentioned on this program, I'm ranking member of the Budget Committee. Very few Americans know what was in the Republican budget because the media really didn't write about it. Throwing 27 million Americans off of health insurance, giving huge tax breaks to the top 0.2%, making massive cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, education, $90 billion over a 10-year period in Pell Grants, cutting massively in nutrition programs for hungry kids and Americans. Do the American people know that is what the Republican point of view is? Do they know that major candidate after major candidate for president now wants to make very significant cuts in Social Security? And some want to move to the privatization of Social Security. So I think the degree that we can get them up on the platform and expose their ideas, I think it works for us big time. Because what media often thinks campaigns are about is it's a soap opera, it is a baseball game. But we have got to flush out these Republicans and let the American people know what these guys stand for. Because what they stand for is very much in opposition to what the vast majority of the American people stand for. Third point that I made in my proposal is I think the Democrats have made a tragic mistake in not developing a 50-state strategy. And this is not an idea that I came up with. My fellow Vermonter Howard Dean came up with this idea some years ago when he was chairman of the DNC. The idea that you abdicate large parts of this country, you don't plant the flag in Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, many of these so-called conservative states. You don't change what goes on in those states unless you begin that discussion, unless you find good candidates, unless you raise public consciousness. So I think we should have debates in Mississippi, debates in Alabama, and tell the people in Utah that we have not forgotten them.
You know, Senator, what you're proposing is like the Lincoln-Douglas debates. That was a general election debate, a Democrat versus a Republican. When did we stop doing that?
Right. Well, that's a good point.
Yeah, extraordinary. We're Senator Bernie Sanders with us in our Brunch with Bernie Hour, a national town hall meeting. Back with your calls for the senator right after this. Welcome back. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie hour. And back to the telephone line, Senator.
Let's do it.
Okay, Daniel in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator, I want to tell you how proud I am of you for stepping up and taking on what you're taking on right now. But I have a question in regards to connecting the dots between income inequality and the drivers of the income inequality. To me, whenever we say that we have an income inequality problem, last year in the 2014 debates, the Republicans would just say, well, they're more productive than everybody else, so they should have the money. But I really feel we need to get into the nitty-gritty, the underlying dynamics of this. And this, to me, is the trade agreements and also Wall Street, because people are not making money based on being more productive. They're making money by just making it in China, selling it as if it was made here, and just pocketing the difference. So I just feel like my question is just, do we need to do a better job of getting into the nitty-gritty of this? Because every time we do it, the Republicans will say, well, they're more productive and they do better products, and that's the truth.
Yeah, well, Daniel, their products are so great. Those Wall Street products and derivatives are just so great that they nearly destroyed the world's economy 8 years ago. And Wall Street, you can't pick up a paper, but every week you read about another massive fine being levied on Wall Street and other financial institutions around the world, because increasingly the business model of these large financial institutions is fraud. They get away with as much as they possibly can, and when things go bad, they expect the taxpayers to bail them out, and they don't have to worry about going to jail because they're too powerful for that. So I think that what we have got to do is to make it clear to the American people that the real job creators in this country are, in fact, the American people, the middle class and the working families. When you go out and go into a restaurant, or you buy a product, or you buy a service, you're creating jobs. And one of the key reasons that our economy is not as strong today as it should be is that we have millions of people who have virtually no disposable income. We requested a GAO study, we released it this week, Tom, which indicated that half of the families in this country, which have people in it 55 years of age or older, have zero amounts of money available for retirement.
Wow.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable how strapped the average American family is, and what happens to them if there's an automobile accident, if there's a serious illness in the family. People become very financially endangered. And that's what's got to change. And I think we got to break this mythology, I think, as Daniel was talking about, that these billionaires are creating all of this wealth. Just not accurate. And we need a radical transformation of the way we do economics in this country. And that means creating millions of decent-paying jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, transforming our energy system, raising the minimum wage, moving toward pay equity, making sure that workers have paid sick time and paid vacation time. When we do that, and when we give a little bit more dignity and security to the American worker, our economy improves.
Jack in Lakeport, California. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for taking my call, and thanks for doing everything you two do. My question really is, Paul Ryan is the point man for TPP, as I understand it. So he has read the TPP. Who else has read it? Have you read it, Sandy, Bernie? And most importantly, who wrote it?
Good. Well, we think we know who wrote it, and those are the folks who usually write major international trade agreements, and that is corporate America, Wall Street, in this case the pharmaceutical industry, I believe, played a powerful, significant role. No, I have not read it because I did not want to give credibility to a sham process. If I wanted to walk into a particular room in the Capitol today, I could, but I could not bring staff, and I could not copy any of the documents, or I could not even take notes. So I suppose if I had a photographic memory, which would allow me to memorize the information, which is, by the way, in heavy legal terminology, on every page, that would be fine, but I can't. So that is what United States senators are entitled to do, unless you're on the committee, unless you have people who have certain types of clearance. But for the average senator, yeah, you can go in there, you can read hundreds of pages of legal documents, but you can't copy anything, and I didn't want to give credibility to that. So one of the many reasons that we should be strongly objecting to this TPP is the lack of transparency. The second reason is that it continues a failed policy of trade agreements which force American workers to compete against very low-wage workers around the rest of the world. In Vietnam, for example, the minimum wage is 56 cents an hour, and our past trade agreements have led to the loss of millions of decent-paying jobs. And the third reason has a lot to do with this invest-the-state dispute settlement process, by which large corporations can sue local, state, federal governments, countries around the world if they believe their health or environmental policies are impeding future profits of those corporations. And that is just totally absurd, anti-democratic, and tells you what this agreement is all about.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting. All declared legitimate presidential candidates are invited on this program for the same. The door is open. We'll be back with more of Bernie right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to your media support group for We the People, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, and it's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting with Senator Sanders, taking your calls. And, Senator, you're still with us, right?
I am right here.
Okay. Let's see here. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I'm sitting here waiting for my Bernie bear to be shipped to me. That's right after the 4th of July. We've always had Vermont bears. Kid sister's still there in Putney. One of the things I learned in my visits to Vermont was about organic food back in the 80s. I am concerned that the TPP will eliminate the USDA's powers here in the United States, and there'll be no labeling on the food. I personally am allergic to Roundup. I don't want to eat it. And I'm allergic to insecticides. Things like peaches and raspberries and celery soak this stuff up instead of water. And I was hoping that you would know something about how the TPP will affect the labeling on the food and where it will come from and what the ingredients are and whether or not it'll be safe to eat. I want to live.
Thanks very much for your question, Norma. And you're picking up on an issue that I just mentioned a moment ago. Let me go into it a little bit further. I think it's pretty clear that our trade policies have failed American workers by allowing corporations to shut down in America big time and go to China and Mexico and elsewhere. But there is an element of this agreement which takes anti-democratic, anti-worker, anti-consumer activities to a whole new level. And what it's about is, let's just say, a state or a municipality in America says, well, look, we want to do GMO labeling. Or we want to make sure that our kids get organic-type food, or whatever it may be. And you can argue with it, is a good policy, is it bad policy, that's fine. But that's what a state government does. That's what the local government chooses to do. They think it's in the best interest of their people. Federal government does the same, environmental legislation, anti-smoking legislation. And then you have a company, in this case a company, a corporate agricultural company, saying, look, you are hurting our profits. We use GMOs in this instance, and you are suggesting that there has to be labeling in the state. We're going to sue you. We're going to an international tribunal, and we're going to make the case that your action is costing us future profits. And this is exactly what Philip Morris did to Australia and to Uruguay. Both countries came up with very strong anti-smoking regulations to protect their kids from getting hooked onto tobacco. And Philip Morris sued them for loss of future profits. So, Norma, I can't predict what happens, but I think your point is correct in that if any action done at the local, state, federal level in this country or in other countries impedes future profits, then that country could be sued, and that case could be brought to the international tribunal.
Alan in Miami, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hey, Senator Sanders, how are you?
Good.
Well, my question is this, because I've been rereading a bit on my American history and stuff, and as a millennial and stuff, I've been very dissatisfied with American politics since I was a kid during President Clinton. And I wanted to know, if you ever do get the Democratic nomination, would you have to basically stick with a Democrat, or would you try to do something like what President Lincoln did back when he was running for president during his first run, and try to have someone of the opposite party be like your vice president, so that basically you could have at least some kind of leeway with Republicans, and maybe they could, I guess, get off your back and let you do your thing?
Well, Alan, I don't think it works quite like that, and a little bit premature to be talking about who my vice president would be.
That was, by the way, a disaster for Lincoln. Johnson ended up getting impeached after Lincoln was
But I think the issue, Alan, is that, and what I've been saying all over this country, is that you have a Congress now, certainly a Republican Party, which is to a significant degree owned by the billionaire class, and their agenda very much reflects. And I'm not going to say every Republican, but the majority of Republicans are now touting the Koch brothers' agenda, and that is cutting Social Security and massive cuts in Medicare and Medicaid and tax on the Environmental Protection Agency, no campaign finance limitations at all. All that's what the Koch brothers have been talking about for 25 years. And the antidote is not, to appoint this type of vice president or that type of vice president. The antidote is a mass movement of people who will be actively involved in the political process, who will demand that Congress listen to the needs of average Americans and not just wealthy campaign contributors. And that is the antidote to the problems we have today. And, I mentioned in the past you have countries like Denmark where voter turnout is well into the 80s. People really do know what's going on in their government, and that's the reason why they have health care for all people free. They have virtually free. They have an excellent child care system so that working parents can go to work without worrying about the quality of care their kids are getting. They have maternity leave and parental leave when you have a baby that the American people couldn't even begin to dream about having. Paid sick leave, strong retirement benefits, because you have governments that actually work for the ordinary people in those countries. We don't have that. So, Alan, my concern now is not about who's going to be vice president. My concern is trying to develop a strong grassroots movement which says to Congress, enough is enough. You're going to have to start representing us and not just the billionaires.
Stan in Troy, Ohio. You're listening on Sirius Satellite Radio. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thank you for taking my call. Senator Sanders, I know in the past you've been associated with the Armed Services Committee, and I had brought up a question before to some of my friends, and also I wanted to bring it up to you. In the last 10 years, we've downsized bases and some of the military spending on those bases, and was wondering, with the problem of the homeless veterans coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places, I was wondering if some of that military money could be spent to refurbish the bases and actually set them up like a job corps situation where they could be retrained and have a place to live until they're retrained and put them back into the workforce.
Well, Stan, thanks very much for your question. I was actively involved not on the Armed Forces Committee, but the Veterans Committee. I am on the Veterans Committee today, and I was the former chairman of the Veterans Committee. And clearly, the idea that we have many veterans in our country today who are living out on the streets, guys from Vietnam and other wars, is unacceptable. I should tell you that the VA has made some progress. We have, I think, lowered the number of veterans who are out on the streets, but there are still far, far too many. And what we need is a comprehensive program, which includes, in some cases, dealing with addiction problems, mental health issues, job training, obviously, and, of course, housing. And your suggestion is that maybe we should take some military facilities that are not being used and perhaps look at the possibility of having them house veterans is a very good idea. But our job must be to make sure that men and women have put their lives on the line to defend this country, and some of them have come back with some very, very serious problems, PTSD, TBI, get all of the care and the help that they need. And I agree with that.
Benjamin in Madison, Mississippi. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Senator, thank you for taking my call. I've also wanted to ask this question, because I think you're a person that would definitely give a truthful answer, and I respect that. In the capital gains situation, when you make $30,000 or $40,000 on a stock, and you pay your capital gains on that, you pay that all up front. But yet, if you lose $30,000 or $40,000, it can take you up to 10 to 15 to 20 years at $3,000 a year against a write-off. And I was just wondering if that leads to some sort of risk-reward detriment, and if you think that is fair, that you could literally take 40 and 50 years at some point to write off a loss versus having to pay the whole thing on the front end. And I appreciate you taking my call, and I appreciate
Benjamin, you make a good point, but I have to tell you, I am not as familiar with that particular issue as I should be. But on the surface, I think you make a fair point.
Well, it actually kind of works the other way around, because an average person who has a down year in terms of income can't, we used to have income averaging, but it went away. I think during Reagan, you can't in the next year. It used to be over 3 years. You used to be able to adjust. If you had a high income year, you and I can't do that as people who get a paycheck. But these capitalists who pay capitalist gains taxes apparently can. But I also don't know all the.
And that's what Benjamin is talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think he was kind of talking about it from more of a Republican perspective or a capitalist perspective, whatever. But it seems to me that. However we treat capital gains income, we only have 30 seconds here. The only way, however we treat capital gains income should be how we treat ordinary income, shouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the, and I apologize to Benjamin for not knowing as much as I might on that. But the bottom line is, one of the reasons that the rich get richer is in many ways they are paying lower tax rates than ordinary working people.
Senator Bernie Sanders with us, taking your calls in our National Brunch with Bernie National Town Hall meeting here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We will be back in just a second with more of your calls for the Senate. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And check out Bernie's website, sanders.senate.gov. You can sign up for his newsletter. He's also got a substantial Facebook page. In fact, they're popping up all over. Welcome back. David in Loves Park, Illinois, watching Free Speech TV on DirecTV. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hello, Senator. Tom. I called the other day. I created that group, Northern Illinois for Bernie Sanders, in my area, the Rockford, Illinois area. My question, Senator, to you is, are there any plans between now and our March primary to come to Illinois?
Yes, I think we will certainly do that. I was in Iowa last week, and actually we did step foot in Illinois. We held a very, very good meeting during the mayoral race there. We had many, many hundreds of people out in the Chicago area, and we will certainly be back. David, thanks very much for your help, and we will be in touch with you when we are going to be coming to Illinois. And we'd appreciate your help in setting up some good meetings.
Charles in Miami, Florida. You're on the air with Senator Sanders. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Hi, Tom and Bernie. Senator, what would you think of this response to a question? The question being, what do you have to say about your lack of experience in foreign affairs? And an answer that I thought would be appropriate is, with the State Department and the CIA combined, we have 90,000 American employees in the U.S. and in almost every country in the world gathering and sorting information. Add to this all the employees of our allies, so you realize that there is almost an unlimited amount of information about any country, any person, or any situation in the world. Having direct experience in foreign affairs could be helpful. But when you realize how quickly things change in the world, you understand the job of the president is to appoint the right people to sort and evaluate this information, to appoint qualified, experienced people.
Charles, let's let Bernie respond.
Charles makes a good point. Let me just say this. It is true, I have never worked in the State Department, and in fact, I'm not on any of the foreign relations committees. But this is what I will say. Way back when, in 1991, actually, when the United States went to war against Iraq the first time, I voted against that war because I feared very much what that war could be the beginning of. And obviously the second war, when we invaded Iraq, I not only voted against that war, but I helped lead the effort against it. I just recently saw, Tom, there's a speech that I gave on the floor of the House in opposition to going to war in Iraq. And I have to say that many of the points that I made were pretty prescient in the sense that what I feared in many cases did happen. Yeah. So I think that to answer Charles's question, experience is important, and I do have some experience, of course. But I think having a sense of the United States' role in the world, where we should be, where we should not be, whether or not we should be in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, which is certainly what many of my Republican friends would like us to be, is something that I very, very strongly oppose. Developing coalitions with countries around the world so we can address foreign policy crises together without the United States always having to send our troops or pay the cost is another issue that I feel strongly about.
We'll be right back with more Senator Sanders. Ten minutes before the hour, it's our Brunch with Bernie hour. Senator Bernie Sanders on the line with us. Jim in Nashville, Tennessee. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Senator. I appreciate you taking the call and doing this every Friday. It is amazing. I was at my local Veterans for Peace meeting last night, wearing, of course, my Bernie Sanders for President and my Bernie Sanders for President T-shirt. And there was a presentation about what is going on at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, at the nuclear facility there. I found out that there's billions being allocated to upgrade that facility, which is the last facility, also I found out, that still makes nuclear bombs in the United States. Also found out the United States was the lone vote in blocking a UN report that would have advocated, not said anything specific, but just advocated a nuclear-free Middle East. So when I'm showing off my T-shirt to everybody, they said, well, do us a favor and find out what Senator Sanders' view is on nuclear proliferation.
Okay. Well, Jim, thanks very much for the call. And it would not surprise you, I think, to hear that my view on nuclear proliferation is that we've got to move as aggressively as we can to prevent other countries from getting nuclear weapons, and we have to do everything that we can to cut back significantly on nuclear weapons that are in the world right now. We are living in a very, very unstable world politically, and, the thing that we have got to make sure never, ever happens again is another nuclear war. So we have got to be aggressive in trying to create the conditions for peace, and all of this is very difficult. I'm not here to tell you I have any magic solution. Middle East is, just in horrendous shape. Other countries around the world are unstable. But you have my word that I will do everything that I can to move forward as aggressively as we can for nuclear proliferation, to end nuclear proliferation.
Right. Marcia in Angier, North Carolina. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Senator Sanders. I just wanted to say, don't change anything about yourself during this campaign. If they're talking about your hair being messed up, you tell them we sent you to help fix the economy. We don't care about your hair. Right? We love your hair. That means you're working. It's not like these guys just primping. Don't make regular political ads. Make Super Bowl ads that people don't forget.
Okay.
I wanted to say good luck.
All right. Thanks very much.
Okay, Marcia. John in Gilbert, Arizona. You're on the air with Senator Sanders.
Yeah, hey, Bernie. I am so grateful that you're running for president. I got two quick questions, one for each. The first one is to you, Tom. Hey, I was wondering if you'd be willing to go commercial-free for every hour that Bernie's on from now till he becomes president, because there's so many people that we need to talk to Bernie. My question to Bernie is, Bernie, as a citizen of the United States, what protection do I have in my amendment against those crazies who exercise their Second Amendment?
You're talking about the open carry guys, John, in Arizona?
It's really, really scary, Bernie. I mean, I live in Arizona. It's no different than all these other states. It is just really crazy to see people carry concealed guns. What protection do I have against the Second Amendment as a citizen?
Well, I don't think it's against the Second Amendment per se. The Second Amendment is the Second Amendment, but it is, I think, in state by state, having effective gun laws, which make sure, among many other things, that guns do not fall into the hands of people who should not have them. And I think, as a citizen of Arizona, you have a right to offer your point of view and what you think makes sense. In Vermont, there are different points of view, but stand up and fight for what you believe.
Olga in Byron, Maine. You are on the air with Senator Sanders.
Hi, Tom. Hello, Senator.
Hello.
I'm very glad that you're running for president. In your message, it's very consistent, very forthright, and I totally agree with your plans. But my question to you is, if you are elected, what's your strategy for the backlash that will probably follow? Because you see what President Obama went through with all the obstruction and...
Olga, we have, just 60 seconds left in this hour.
Olga, my strategy is a pretty simple one.
I'm sorry, it's 2 minutes we have, Bernie.
Okay. What I have said, and I have said time and time and time again, and repeat it right here, that no president, and people have got to understand that, not the smartest, best president that you can imagine, can address the crises facing the middle class or deal with climate change or deal with war and peace issues or deal with the college affordability. You can't do that unless there is a mass political movement in this country which tells Congress that either they do the right thing in terms of representing the needs of the American people or that they are not going to be reelected. And second of all, that very same movement has got to make sure that we are putting people into office who do stand for working families. And I say that because the powers of the billionaire class in Washington, D.C., and their lobbyists and their campaign donors are so powerful that the only way to dislodge them is through a mass political movement in this country. It is not acceptable to me that we have elections. Last election, 63% of the American people didn't vote. 80% of young people didn't vote. You have millions and millions of people who have no clue as to which political party controls the House or the Senate. The media does not do a particularly good job in informing us about what's going on in Washington. All of that has got to change. And when we have a politically educated population of people who are involved in the political process, you're going to radically change what goes on in Washington, D.C., because people will know and will demand that government works for them and not just for a handful of very wealthy people. And, Olga, that is my belief.
Senator, thank you so much for being with us today and all these other days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.